So to give us answers to those questions and more, let's head to Abuja. Marpe.
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. We have with us this morning Mr. Okechukwu Enelamah, who is the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. Honorable Minister, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yes, so I'm sure you heard the questions posed by our correspondent there, Bosun Omofai, as well as our senior business editor in the report which he did. Just wondering, do you have immediate answers to some of those questions? Or perhaps we should start from what precisely do we hope to benefit? Or what precisely do we hope to do with access to our own part when we do access to $60 billion that has been made available by China?
Thank you. First, I appreciate Channels Television and other media houses for focusing on our relationship, not just with China, but with the rest of the world, as that brief commentary or documentary covered. The first thing to say is that the China-Africa relationship is a strategic one. And why they say it's a strategic one? The thing you have to recognize about China is that this FOCAC, which is called the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation that we went to, was the 8th in a series. So it's been going on since 2000 or so. So this is a long-range plan about cooperation, that will have mutuality of interest. And like they say, time itself is a test of things. And my own understanding, from what I can see, there is mutuality of interest there. On the one hand, China basically has developed to the point where it needs the rest of the world as markets, and as markets not just for goods and services, but also for capital, and also for its companies that want to grow. Just the same thing that happened with the West, by the way, in the past. So this is just another cycle that is going on. On the other hand, Africa is at a point where it needs infrastructure, like your colleague said in the commentary. And also, we know that a lot of the things that China has are the things that could be useful to us. And a lot of things we have could be useful to them. And that's really what trade is based on. That's what investment is based on. That's what industry is based on. I would agree that it is important that every country, and Africa as a whole for that matter, that we should be careful. In any partnership or any relationship, you need to be attentive. After all, we're talking about agreements here. And those agreements need to work for both sides. I can say, speaking for Nigeria, that the things that went on there were of both immediate and long-term benefit to Nigeria. And I can give you several examples as we go along.
Okay, well, you've talked about a strategic relationship. The question is, whose strategy is it? Is it China's strategy or is it Africa's strategy? Africa is not exactly a country, it's a continent, made up of different leaders. So whose strategy is looming large here? Yeah,
so first, when I say strategic relationship, I use strategic in contrast to tactical. So when you say something is strategic, it means it's long-term, it means it's a plan, it means it's something you've thought about. It doesn't have to be somebody's strategy, it just means that that plan is not a knee-jerk reaction. It's the exact opposite of the word tactical. Plan? No, hold on, I'm going somewhere. Hold on, I'm going somewhere, because I understand your question, that's why I'm going there. And it's very important to set the context. If we don't set the context, people can misunderstand the point I was making, which is to say that this is a thoughtful process to a relationship. For instance, a marriage can be strategic, or a relationship can be strategic. So having said that, the point is that what I'm saying is that long-term, our own strategy, to come back to your question, is that we want to build our infrastructure. Nigeria, for instance, has a 3-point strategy, right? We basically have said, we want to have peace in our country, and I'm talking about the vision of the president now. We want to have peace in our country, we want to root out corruption, and we want the economy to grow. When you come to the economy growing, infrastructure is extremely important. When you come to building infrastructure, we need partners. So from our point of view, God bless you. Yeah. From our point of view, what we're trying to do is basically to attract capital, know-how, and the expertise we need, right, to build the infrastructure. And China is willing to cooperate with us on that. And I'm sure you're aware of all the projects that are going on. And I think those projects are beneficial. Now, from point of view of China, they have their own strategy. They want to expand abroad. And you will agree with me that our partnership can be mutually beneficial. And that's the intent, and hopefully that will be the outcome.
Honorable Minister, what do you say to those who say that if you take all the agreements that were signed and you bring them together, that ultimately it amounts to Nigeria walking into a growing and imminent debt trap?
Well, as you know, just again, speaking with one's background as an accountant, the thing about debt, right, it's about assets and liabilities. There are two sides to the equation. So, and I will use the example of Nigeria. In Nigeria, we signed agreements in excess of $5 billion. Now, one of them, just one of the agreements, which I happen to have worked on, which is with a Chinese group, basically that is coming to invest in industrial parks and special economic zones across Nigeria for $2 billion. Those are investments that are coming to make. They're not even loans as such. They're literally coming to invest here. And for those investments, they basically want to grow. They're a leader in, cotton textile garments, and they want to make Africa, or Nigeria in particular, a hub for Africa and other parts of the world.
Which part of the country will host those textile industries? They
will be hosted all across. One will be in the north. We are trying to work with them in the Kano Free Trade Zone. One will be in the east, in the Yimba city, which is a new industrial park or industrial city that is being developed. And the third one will be in Lekki Free Trade Zone in Lagos. So it's a very thoughtful, strategic plan again. And we're working with them to implement that. Now, that's a $2 billion investment outlay. Now, the other agreements that were signed, for instance, by NNPC that relate to ethanol and, and sort of generation of energy. Now, I think those are also strategic and useful. The point is that you are right, that if you collect debt and you squander it, right, then obviously you could face a debt trap or challenge in the future. And that's why even the Chinese president said, and is widely quoted to said, their funding should not be and must not be for vanity projects. And in the case of Nigeria, we have a duty to ourselves to make sure that, like, whatever project finance, remember these things are called project finance, by the way. Of course, project finance itself frequently is debt. But that the project finance must finance viable projects that will further industrialization, that will create jobs for our people, and frankly, that will repay, over time, because the value that will create will be more than the cost of building them.
Let's get into some of the deliverables. When we talk about the kind of the high volume projects, these are obviously, like you said, project finance or debt related projects. Mambila, hydropower, 3,050 megawatts in Taraba. We hear about the railway projects. When you look at it all together, how much of it is actually going to be implemented? Because we've heard severally. We've heard about Mambila dating back to, really decades now. We've heard even the railways, investment. We've heard about that probably from about 2010, 2011. Now, why should it be believed now that the money, the figures we're hearing will actually come into the country and that construction on these projects would actually start?
Thank you for that question, because I think it's actually an excellent question. And this is a message we've been wanting to get across, that these projects have been there. They've been conceptualized in the past. But honestly, as far as I can tell, and I've been back in Nigeria for many years now, I haven't seen the degree of commitment to implementation. And and so if you look at the railways, as you know, the sort of Kaduna-Abuja railway has been finished. The Lagos-Ibadan is going on. So these are actual things. They're not things you do in hiding. It is true that before there was a lot of talk about them, but they didn't get done. The commitment of President Buhari and his government is to ensure that the infrastructure gets built, because he actually has a burden to have the infrastructure deficit addressed. And this is something he has said publicly. And that is why this relationship with China on those infrastructure projects that are demonstrably useful must be done. And so if you look at the railways that are going on, if you look at Mambila, same thing. Before, it had been there for well over 10 years, just there, but sort of almost abandoned, frankly. But now there has been a recommitment by both China and by Nigeria to develop it. And as you said, it will generate, a lot of power that will add to our power availability, our power national grid and so on. And that will make a huge difference, because we still have a power deficit because of this.